Peter Quinn.
Present.
Secretary Rodriguez.
Present.
Linda Eisen.
Present.
Tim James.
Here.
Gerald Lavenberg. Treasurer Eichenberg.
Here.
Commissioner Dunn.
Present.
Lee Rawson.
Present.
Scott Smart.
Here.
And Lynn Hall.
Present.
Okay, thank you. The agenda, are there any comments on the agenda? Motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second. Scott, is there a second? Yes, thank you. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Nobody's opposed. Agenda is approved. Minutes of the prior meeting, June 26th. Any comments, corrections, or changes? All right.
Motion to approve the minutes is stated.
Scott, thank you so much. Linda, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Investment matters, Linda.
At the investment meeting, we went over the fund that we will be presenting today, and it was passed unanimously with minimum discussion. It was a pretty clean fund. We had a discussion about what might make meetings at the investment committee more productive with regards to certain input by asset class directors. And that was a very productive meeting. And you'll be seeing what we saw today.
Terrific. And let's move right
Mr.
to,
Chairman,
yes, sir.
can I ask, Linda, in the discussion, you guys talk about, under private equity, did you have a chance to talk about, Ms. Marisa talked about expanding the amount, the percentage, about maybe getting into, instead of just venture capital, other areas?
Yes, we're investigating that. We're wanting Sun Mountain as well as our asset class directors to come up with suggestions on proper sizing, proper impact, and come up with recommendations to us.
Okay, let's move to our first and only investment. Thank you. Dave, will you lead us through this discussion? Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. We are here to talk about Hellman and Friedman 9. Hellman and Friedman 9 is a buyout strategy, investing in large cap stocks. What we mean by that is the investment size for each position will be between 500 million and 3 billion. These investments will be split between North America and Europe, and historically that's been about a 2/3 North America and 1/3 European split. The target size for Fund 9 is 15 billion, and just for perspective, Fund 8 was 11.1 billion and Fund 7 was 8.9. So they continue to increase that size. They consider 7 sectors to be core sectors: software, financial services, business and business information services, healthcare, internet and media, energy and industrials, and retail and consumer. And those were listed in order of highest average wage historically. Software and financial services actually have made up about 49% of the investments historically. Hellman & Friedman has approximately 120 employees and over 60 investment professionals. They're divided up into 3 offices in San Francisco, New York, and London. Hellman seeks to partner with outstanding management teams in very high quality business franchises where they feel like they have an advantage in the transaction. They tend to concentrate their portfolio on their best ideas. What we mean by that is probably between 9 and 15 companies. And this is unusual for a buyout fund. They can do this because historically they've had very low loss ratios. We're talking 3% of invested capital in their last 4 fully invested funds. So funds 4, 5, 6, and 7. Hellman & Friedman is also somewhat unique in the sense that they're an owner-operated firm. 23 partners own the firm, and there's no outside capital right now. The GP commitment, which we like to see, is very significant for this fund. It's about $1 billion, which is higher than most competitors. They have an outstanding track record across different markets and economic cycles. Most of their funds are first quartile funds. Just to give you some perspective, the worst fund that they have is Fund 6. That was invested before the GFC, and that net IRR is 13%, and their net multiple is 1.9 times. On the flip side, Funds 2, Funds 4, and Funds 5 have returned at least a 3.2 times multiple on a gross basis. In sum, Hellman & Friedman is a very high-quality firm. They have an excellent reputation in the marketplace. They have managed multiple leadership transitions, which are successfully, which are very important to us. Their funds are in high demand, and this is, we're considering this as a new relationship. We are seeking up to a $100 million commitment to Hellman & Friedman 9, and it will be the third commitment this year. And
I'm sorry?
the third commitment this year.
Oh, yeah, first 10 off.
Yes. And with that, I'll turn it over to Richard Pugmire of the.
Thank you. I know it's probably hard to believe that a $15 billion fund is oversubscribed in the market, but kind of due to the quality of the firm and the state of the fundraising market, that's the case right now. And just to give you a little insight into our process, we actually started talking about Hellman & Friedman over a year ago with the private equity staff. We go through forward calendars and look what's coming not only this year, but years out. And we started working on that relationship over the last year. And we're actually very excited that the SIC is being considered as one of the few new LPs that's going to be admitted into Hellman & Friedman 9. You have our copy of our investment memo. You see why we like this. I mean, the one thing about Hellman & Friedman that's a little different from some of the large firms that we bring you is this is a firm that's focused on one strategy, one fund. They don't have a venture capital fund. They don't have a credit fund. They don't have a small buyout fund. They're just focused on that one strategy. The entire firm is focused on that. And I think it shows in the performance track record, and they've done quite well over time. Limited losses. The team is strong and deep. I thought I could hit on some of the risks in our investment memo real quick and then turn it over to Hellman & Friedman for a little bit more insight. We talked about in our memo one of the risks around transitioning leadership. This is an issue with a lot of the private equity firms that have been around a long time. They have a senior leadership team. They're getting close to retirement, and they need to transition to the next generation of leaders. Hellman & Friedman is been through that 4 different times now, and they've been one of the better firms to transition leadership. They do it over time. They identify who the future leaders are, and they do it over time through co-CEO roles, chairman roles, and it's been very orderly over time. And I think they've set a good example in the marketplace of how to transition leadership. One of the other risks that we talked about is the larger fund size. They're going up to $15 billion this time. You can look at a pattern shown over prior funds, though. They have done well on larger investments. In the past, they've also offered co-investments to a lot of limited partners. So the larger fund will now allow them to bring more of that capital back into the fund. And then also, the other thing that we talk about is certain fund terms can be improved. I think specifically, this fund does not have a preferred return, which is different from what you see in a lot of the large buyout. Hellman & Friedman has never had a preferred return throughout their history. So it's not that they're going away from a preferred return, but they haven't had one. And the reason why is they believe that it could actually kind of create misalignment between the general partner and between limited partners, because it might force them to sell something earlier than what they want in order to lock in that preferred return rather than holding it to get a better return. When you look at the past performance, a preferred return wouldn't have made much difference in the performance of the fund because they exceeded them in all of the funds. And you always have to look at fund terms as a whole. And one of the things that really differentiates Hellman & Friedman that David mentioned was the large general partner commitment. It's one of the largest general partner commitments that we've seen in the market. And that really creates strong alignment with limited partners because they're putting their own money into these investments alongside the limited partners. And so we're recommending an investment of up to $100 million for the State Investment Council at Hellman & Friedman. With that, I want to introduce Eric Regatz, who's a partner at Hellman & Friedman. He's been with the firm since 2001 and based in the San Francisco office.
Good, well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. As Richard mentioned, I'm one of the lead investment partners at Hellman & Friedman. I've been at the firm for about 17 years. I've been doing private equity a little over 20 years. I got my start back in the late 90s. First off, I'd love to say just thank you for having me here today, and thank you for your consideration of our fund. We are first and foremost stewards of capital, and so it's always great to come and visit our investors or potential investors here and really keep grounded in what it's really all about. Got to know David and Richard here over the course of this year. We have a lot of respect for them as individuals and for the organization we built. So obviously great to meet the extended organization here. Now, I know you've seen our materials and had a brief on us, so I will keep my comments relatively brief here, but happy to answer any questions. What I thought it would make sense to do is really kind of build on a little bit of what you heard and really kind of four distinctive areas that we think of at Hellman & Friedman as differentiating us from a lot of the other private equity firms. The first of those really is our focus. Richard mentioned we only are a private equity firm. We don't have other funds. Frankly, we have 120 people that wake up every day with the sole focus of putting the capital to work that we've raised for our private equity fund. That's a pretty different approach than a lot of our brethren and our size have taken, where there's lots of different funds and different strategies and such. And we really believe that ultimately there's lots of things in the world that we don't understand, that we're not experts in, that we really try to develop a core competency in a very small area of things that we've got some capabilities on and put all our investment opportunities. Second thing I would highlight is our investment philosophy. It's not a complicated investment philosophy, but it really does define who we are and what are the types of investments that fit for us. And fit is a word that we use a lot internally. Lots of ways to make money in the world, lots of people that have expertise in things. Again, we want to just focus on the things that we think we've developed in state of competency, and that's investing in great businesses. And it's nothing more complicated than finding businesses that are sustainably differentiated from their competitors, have great management teams, produce real cash flow, and grow. Right? Motherhood and apple pie kind of stuff. And if you met 10 managers sitting here in this seat, probably 9 of them would say that exact same thing. But what it really means is the things that we're not interested in. We're not doing turnarounds. We're not making venture capital investments on the next technology. We're not trying to predict the price of oil. We're not trying to buy undifferentiated businesses at low multiples. We really believe that there are very few things that get us excited. That's partnering with great people to build great businesses, and that's all of what we've seen in the last 30, 40 years of our firm, and ultimately all the things that you will see in front and moving forward. So focus, investment philosophy, alignment is a big deal for us. That's both into our companies as well as with our partners, our limited partners, our investors here. When we talk about the companies, I really highlight 3 things that are important to us. First and foremost, it's about sharing the same values as our companies. Doing business the right way, no shortcuts. Life's too short to really operate in any other way. Secondly, making sure we share. And then 3, sharing the same economics. And what does that mean? It means we always invest in the same security as our management teams. We don't treat and create a pool of profits that only we benefit from and our management team doesn't benefit from. And it means that we put real capital into those companies alongside of the investment teams. With our limited partner group, very similar sort of the 3 points of philosophy. Ultimately, we've got a very big investment in our fund, $1 billion we're putting into Fund 9 here. We've always, over the history of the firm, never had pools of fees that we're not sharing. We never charged transaction fees that we kept and then we're ultimately forced to sort of give back. Our belief is, let's just keep it simple. If we make good investments, there's plenty of economics to go around. Let's all focus our efforts really on one outcome that we're all looking for. So focus, investment philosophy, alignment, and then the last thing I would just say is culture. in some ways, we're almost a throwback to investment partnerships of old. We're ultimately a pretty small group of people that like working with each other, that have worked with each other for a long period of time. The average tenure of our investment community partners is 23 years. The average tenure of our other partners is 13 years altogether. We are 100% owner operated. All of the fees that are paid are directed to people that are driving value at the firm. We pass around value, book value at the end of each year based on who's contributing to the firm. And ultimately, we're a pretty down-to-earth group. I don't know if that's being based in San Francisco, but I sort of have to say, what we are is we're not from New York. We're not Wall Street types. We don't argue about where our name is in the press releases that come out about our company. We ultimately really are all about working with great people to make great investments, and that's what's fun with us. So the net of all that is, what we've tried to do over the years is pick an investment approach that we have confidence will work. Align our organization and our whole ecosystem around that approach. Focus all our resources on doing exactly that one specific thing, and then most importantly, recruit and retain great people to bring it all the way. That's what the firm's been about for 34 years, and if we are successful, and we'll continue for the next one. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. Questions at this point? We've already had the extensive discussion of the investment committee. We have all your materials, so questions might not be extensive, but anybody have anything? I have a trivial question, but being a mathematician, on page 7 of your track record shows your net on Fund 8 exceeds.
I was going to guess that's what that question is.
I can see how
How does that work?
the timing could result in that, I guess. I guess you transacted something before you called investment, or?
That's exactly right. So what we've done in the last couple of funds is we have a firm revolver, and we'll use the revolver to fund capital calls, and then at the end of the year, for administrative purposes, call capital. It's not a permanent investment vehicle. It doesn't change the way that we underwrite. It's simply
So that's a fairly temporary,
that's
we're seeing more of that these days. Anybody else have a question? Yes.
Yes, our investment committee was very impressed with the presentation by Helen Friedman also. Based on the recommendations of the Council Investment Committee, Private Equity Advisor Pavilion, SIC staff, and the General Fiduciary Oversight of RDK, I move that the State Investment Council approve a $100 million commitment to Hellman and Friedman Capital Partners 9 LP, subject to and contingent upon New Mexico legal requirements, New Mexico State Investment Council policies, negotiation of final terms and conditions, and completion of appropriate paperwork.
Second. So just to clarify, is that 100 million or is it up to 100 million? We have no idea where that's going. That's why.
We have a minimum. We have a floor that was promised that we're working on it, depending on how some of the other LPs are.
So does our motion have to say up to? Yeah, I think I would amend the motion to say up to, otherwise.
I'm curious,
Yes, sir.
is whether or not we should know what the floor is, and whether or not the motion should be concluded. I'm just wondering why it, because usually when we do up to, it usually ends up being that back. So I was just, it just seemed like an unusual.
Well, the discussion that Chris and I have had are looking at a minimum of 60 million. But depending on how things fall out with some of the people that haven't gotten their docs, it could be higher than that. So what we wanted to do was make sure, it's hard for people that are capacity constrained to want to commit to a number, but we need, obviously, the benefit of the state investment office to make sure that it at least reaches some point. So we were comfortable with that.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to follow up, because I was originally going to ask you, Richard, why only a commitment of $200 million? This is an exciting new, yeah, I mean, it's exciting to me. Why aren't we doing 200 million?
Yeah,
So,
it's really capacity on how many. I have a lot of existing investors who want to increase their commitment to the fund. And so they're trying to balance that out along with accepting a few new limited partners. And they are turning away limited partners too, that want access to this fund because they just don't have capacity. You know,
and that was the same thing Lynn told me when I asked her when you were speaking.
yeah, and you know, what we're hoping is you establish a relationship in the next fund, you know, you can increase it beyond that if you want. It's the most realistic.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, are we ready to vote? All those in favor, signify. Aye. Are any opposed? Okay, we pass.
Mr. Chairman, just clarification, did we amend it to a floor?
Yes, it was amended, up to. We need an official process.
I heard up to 100 million.
Yes.
Would allow for 60, I did not hear a floor in the motion.
I just didn't hear,
Okay.
I just didn't
Let
hear.
me go ahead and, let's go ahead and make sure.
Second.
I'll say, I will amend this motion to up to 100 million.
So these questions about a floor of 60,
Oh,
No.
up to.
well,
I don't hear that floor.
We don't
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so, voting again, please, all in favor? Any opposed? No. I'm abstention. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it,
I do have a question for Pavilion. I'm reading the papers that you have been acquired.
Again?
Yeah. Could you please tell me how that might impact you as far as not only personnel staying, but manner in which you do business?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Yeah, so what Linda was referring to was, it was announced 2 weeks ago that we are being acquired by Mercer. The piece of the Pavilion Advisory Group, which is a general consulting, and our group, Pavilion Alternatives Group. And we're gonna, it still has to go through regulatory approvals and whatnot, hopefully that'll be done by the end of the year. But we're not expecting any changes in personnel. It's going to be servicing the state investment council. Both Alan and I are still going to remain very much involved in the state investment council. And the thing that I'm excited about is the additional resources. I think if you look, I know a lot of you have been on the council a while. If you look at kind of what we've done in the early years compared to what we do now, hopefully you've seen improvements in the depth of analysis that we've done and in the documents that we've provided you. And I'm hoping that that's going to continue now that we have more resources as part of Mercer. So that's what I'm excited about. So that's my view. But I'm not going anywhere. I'm still going to be based in Salt Lake City.
Good, thank you. All right. Next on the agenda is the Burgess Portfolio Management Subscription Service and
Yeah, well,
Vince.
I'll run that by you, Mr. Chairman. I will say, to Linda's comment about Pavilion, I was one of their first public fund clients. Rich could probably tell you I was second or third, I think, when I hired them in Kansas, and I made a mistake. I should have, when I hired them, also demanded that they allow me to make a 10% investment. Would have been one of my best ones in Kansas. Anyway, in front of you is a memorandum written by our analyst team recommending a product called Burgess. It's really in front of you because it exceeds $50,000 contract limit, policy limit. So really, the information's in the memorandum. I think it's an important piece of research tool for our team going forward. So we recommend that we be able to write a contract.
I did read the hyperlink to the article that used the material. I thought it was very fascinating. How do you plan to use Burgess?
Let me get the experts up here. Guys, come on up. They want a discussion of it.
Well, yeah, so there's a
Introduce
few.
yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Clay Camper. I work under Paul in the real estate and real assets. Just pass through the organization. You know, correct me. I'll kick it off and then you guys can jump in. There's a few things. It's a pretty broad platform as far as software goes. So there's a lot of macro impacts that we can look on to help the strategist team and basically help align in which directions we want to go. So the unique thing about Burgess is, as opposed to some of their competitors, which go out with FOIA requests to get IRRs or what have you, the various funds, they actually track all the underlying cash flows of all of the funds that get put into their systems. So for example, we're going to put our cash flows into their system so we can better track our own cash flows, which gives us really great insight into things like pacing and what's actually happened with all of those cash flows in returns through various asset classes down to, buyout funds in 1997 under $500 million, for example, what happened. So we can really go in depth and look at a lot of scenario analysis. On top of that, because we're going to be inputting our own cash flows, and also they will go in and track all of our underlying holdings, so all the way down to the property and company level. We can run much more sophisticated holdings and analysis reports, and kind of run very simply and easily a lot of point-to-point performance analytics that'll allow us to basically say, hey, how would these types of funds, or how did our funds do during this very specific section in the market? So if we were running things like late cycle stuff that Vince has talked about, this will be a very good tool to help us with that, and what's traditionally been a very opaque asset class with alternatives. And then the last thing that I'll talk about, which I know Pete is very excited for, is that we also have Burgess is much better about allowing us to track underlying fund universes and doing a comparison within that. So how do we do versus our peers, 2005 buyout funds or whatever the case may be. And so I don't know if you want to tag on to that.
The good thing about the system is it allows us to get very granular for a fund. We can compare fund performance to a particular public market index to a more granular private market index within Burgess. It's become effectively the most robust source of data that academics are now using as well. I tend to believe longer term will probably, the next time we have a structured study, we'll probably change our index and potentially use this as a replacement for it. The good thing is it's a comparable, the data that's going into our system is from people like us, LPs like us. So you're comparing, it's an apples to apples comparison. When we put in our 120 funds, that data will start to be used in their indices. So it's a very effective way for us to compare our portfolio. Now we kind of do it a little rough and dirty. Every quarter we compare our numbers to the different Cambridge indices, but we're not always entirely sure what's in there. It's not a perfect system. This will be a lot more granular. It's very, very detailed in terms of percentile performances and comparisons against public markets. It'll make our decision-making process a lot better.
So, in a simplistic sense, is this a system that allows limited partners to share information amongst themselves through the mechanism of Burgess?
Confidentially, through a confidential.
Or confidential?
Effectively, yeah. You can't see the underlying fund distribution.
No, I understand that.
But yeah, it is.
So and there's no restrictions from in our investment agreements with our managers that would.
No.
That,
Given all of our funds, nobody could see that we're participating. They don't see the names. There's other systems, data that you can find in stuff like Precoin or Bloomberg that is all based on FOIA requests. And that data, we spent a decent amount of time looking at that data. It's nice to have. We do use it, but it's, it is based on FOIA requests. You always wonder the data integrity of it.
so the strength of Burgess depends on how many subscribers they ultimately obtain.
Yeah. And at this point, they have over 1,000 different institutions that are basically uploading data, sovereign wealth funds, year on there. So there's a lot of money currently to support their data.
Are they also supplying services to GPs to aggregate data within a fund? I'm always surprised at the complexity of data collection for the GP. In information rights, understanding the cap structure, being able to value, the capital stack or preferred? Are they providing services to general partners or just to institutions?
It's just LPs at this point. It's, I guess GPs can subscribe if they want to, but the data is based on LP data. So the good thing about it is from a data perspective, let's use an example, we're in Hellman and Friedman's funds, they'll use, depending on how many LPs in their portfolio, they have to enter that data once, so they'll enter into the portfolio in the system. And then based on our commitment size, they'll tell us our percentage in particular portfolio companies and the data that Hellman provides us. So,
one good example of how that would be used is, we know there's a lot of midstream companies that go across not just our infrastructure investments, but also our energy investments. And this is something that's going to make it a lot easier for us to see that kind of cross-holding across two different segments of our portfolio and really roll those numbers up and kind of see all the energy holdings, which we can do now, but it's a much more laborious process. And so this will simplify and make it much more systematic and accurate.
Are you using this for sourcing, or are you using this for evaluating our current holding, our current funds? Well, okay, why aren't our consultants using this instead of us using this?
I think we do need to have a certain amount of resources internally so that I know that Richard does use it as well, but it's good to have that data at your fingertips when you're on evaluating. I think for this process to work well, you need a staff that's well-informed, well-resourced, and you need a consultant well-resourced and informed. You put those two together and end up making the best decisions, rather than just relying on your consultant for their data. So you can, that interaction between the consultant and staff is very important.
So it actually improves our due diligence because we are not only relying upon a consultant to provide our sourcing and evaluation, we have it at our fingertips to look at it as well and to have better dialogue with our consultants.
Yeah, and it makes it much simpler internally to work with, like the strategy team and everything as well, as opposed to going back and forth on an email chain over 2 weeks with consultants summarizing things in accordance. And be able to run that information in real time.
We apparently have a third state agency that uses this group, so I'm assuming that their contracts are similar to ours. So as a state, we're paying $600,000 a year for this service. Was there a way to combine those three contracts and negotiate a lower price?
Later.
I don't know who negotiates these things, but.
Well, you just identified a reason for considering consolidation.
I believe pricing is based on the amount of funds that we have. So there probably is an opportunity, but we're not sure.
The bulk of the fee is paid to on your AUM and then the number of fund count. There's a small piece, it's a fixed piece, but yeah, the bulk is on fund count and underlying AUM.
Thank you.
Yes, we.
I just wanted to follow up on Linda's question here to Richard. You guys subscribe to this service?
Yes, we subscribe to Burgess. We've already started switching over some clients from Cambridge to Burgess. We haven't done it with you yet because your official benchmark is Cambridge. And so we want to do a like-to-like in performance. But just last week, I did some analysis. We looked at public market equivalent returns a little more in depth. We used the Burgess database because it's a really good platform to run things like that. Whereas, other platforms, you can get the data, but it's hard to get that level of detail to run like a public market equivalent. So it's a pretty impressive tool.
I guess we need a motion.
Okay, I'll do that.
Thank you.
Based upon the recommendation of SIC staff, I move that the SIC approve a 3-year contract with the Burgess Group LLC to provide portfolio management analytic services under terms and conditions discussed and reviewed by the council today.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So that's unanimous as well. And thank you. Now we go into our reporting matters, I guess.
I can do that, Mr. Chairman. Let's start with the doc that's in front of you. It says handouts from the SIC meeting like this. Carrie put that in front of you this morning. And just flip over to page 1. There's only three slides in here, and we'll go through them fairly quickly before we kind of hit the high points of the performance reports. This first page that you're seeing, actually page 2 of the handout, there's a table of peer rankings, so actually our actual returns and peer rankings for a database called IFX, or Investor Force is the name of it. The LFC does a quarterly report, as you're aware, of the investing agencies in the state. And one of the things that they do in that report is have a peer comparison section. And they've adopted the IFX, or the Investor Force database. Now, you've seen numbers from Tux. We had shown you those in the past. This is very similar, with the exception that it's based on net of fee returns. So all of the funds that go into this IFX database are reporting net of fees, and then of course we're reporting our net of fee number into this database. So what you can see here is various timeframes ended last June 30, 1, 3, 5, 7, and 10. The return for each land grant settlers for each of those timeframes, and then the associated percentile rank against that database. 1 is best, 100 is worst. So you can see roughly over time, we're sitting around top third in this database on net fees. Now, you may contrast that, and Marcia's going to go through the executive summary here in a little bit. You may contrast that with the gross of fees database, which we tend to perform a little bit lower. So we've tended to be between the 40th and the 60th in the gross of fees database. That has a good bit to do with the way we calculate what gross is. So in your performance reports, you'll notice that the difference between the gross performance of, say, land grant and net performance is only about 20 basis points. Well, we know our fees are higher than 20 bips. But the way we calculate gross is it's gross on just the public market assets. All your private market assets are reported net. So we have sort of a combination there. That's why you see better numbers in a purely net database. We think some of the participants in the gross database are reporting full gross, including the fees, the private investments where we're not. We did a little study on that and had a good discussion in the investment committee about that dynamic. So we think this gives the cleanest view of performance relative to peers. But because you all don't typically see the IFX, it's in the LFC report. I thought we'd show it to you, at least today.
And so when we had that discussion in investment, you made the comment or observation that this mix of gross and net reporting might distort our rankings by as much as a quartile.
Yeah,
which I think is worth repeating. These aren't rounding errors. This is a significant distortion.
That's right. And it was just sort of a math model I put together to sort of calculate about how much it was costing us. And it's up to a whole quartile performance. So whereas it might say 50th percentile in your Tux report, it may be a 25th percentile here overall and over time, and also over various periods. So roughly, yeah, it could cost us like a quartile on this gross database simply because of the way we calculate it. So this is a little bit cleaner in terms of it's more apples to apples, net fees to net fees. And I think this is a better picture of where we're at right now. Now, I